Good afternoon.
Good
This is
afternoon.
Alan. Hi, you must be Janet Frymouth.
I am.
And I'm Alan Appel, a reporter with the New Haven Independent, the host here on the second day of The Great Give, here in New Haven on WNHH 103.5 FM, community radio in New Haven. And welcome, Janet Frymouth of Children in Placement.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So this is the second day. I just took a look at the donation board. We're at $2.6 million, which is really phenomenal. From let me see, 13,000 individual donors. I think it's terrific.
Yes, it's really incredible. I actually looked at it this morning myself.
So, Janet, tell us about your organization. And then apparently you have to sing for your supper a bit here. Did you come prepared with I don't know, a song or a legal brief that you would like to read?
I have a poem.
All right. Well, so but before you do the poem, your organization is childreninplacement.org. People could go there to make a contribution.
Sure. And so our organization has been around for 40 years. We are a volunteer-based organization that recruits and trains volunteers to go to court on behalf of children, similar to what DCF does. But we're more independent, and we're a party to the case. And so while a DCF caseworker might have 30 cases, our volunteers have 1 or 2.
What does that phrase mean, party to the case?
As parents or the child are parties to the case,
right,
the guardian ad litem is also a party to the case.
So technically, what does that mean? And legally, what does that mean?
Legally, that means that we are able to advocate on behalf of the child, that we have a voice in the room.
It's not just escorting or accompanying. It's
correct.
A voice that legally needs to be heard and on the record.
Exactly. And, our GALs provide a report, and that's also a legal record.
So childreninplacement.org. Now, I just, looked up the organization a bit, and you have a lot of people that you're working with. This is a very big organization.
We are statewide. We cover all of the courts, throughout the regions. We have 7 regional managers that are statewide as well. So in New London, in Willimantic, in Hartford, in Waterbury, Bridgeport, New Haven, Hartford. So we cover, quite a range, and we have about 150 volunteers that provided last year over 10,000 hours of service. So that's quite a bit. And like I said, we've been doing that for 40 years. And this past year, we launched a program called Youth Sponsors, where it's a little bit different, but it's more of a long-term mentoring situation, whereas a child, who has been in foster care or many foster care homes, and sometimes involved with the juvenile justice system, is identified and placed with a trained volunteer that becomes their go-to, someone that's consistent in their life. And this isn't, I'm going to be 6 months a mentor and then I'm out of your life. This is a commitment for as long as the child wants this person to be around, which is, significant. I have my own mentee that started last year, and he had been in and out of foster care since he was 13. He's now 21. Didn't trust me, didn't trust anybody. And it took a little while to establish that, back and forth, him pushing me away, but me being consistent with being there. And that's what this youth sponsorship program is about. And we just started that, like I said, about a year ago.
So if people are listening to the great radiothon and want to make a contribution to childreninplacement.org, or they can go to thegreatgive.org, will their contributions go to that particular program or to all the operations of the organization?
It's to all the operations. It's to help us recruit more volunteers and on either side. And actually, we're starting one volunteer training next week. We've gone virtual, which I didn't think was ever going to happen. But since we were in the middle of a training when all of this came about, and we finished our training virtually, and it worked out really well. So we're actually moving forward, starting the youth sponsorship training next week for a group. And then the following week, we're going to start a GAL training for another group of people.
Okay, see, we have to back up a minute here for our general listeners. The
Sure.
GALs, that phrase stands for
Guardian ad
Guardian
litem.
ad litem.
Hmm.
So for people who didn't take Latin, Guardian in litem is actually, I was proud of my Latin high school scores, but ad litem means to the law, correct?
Correct. So we're guardian of the technically of law in court for the child.
So explain why this need is so great. And you have thousands of kids who are, these are, the focus is having this guardian ad litem, this GAL, for kids who do not have a permanent placement, that they're floating through the foster system. Is
So
that why the
yep,
role is so important?
They could be in the foster care system, or they could have a petition from a kin member, a grandmother, an aunt, that thinks that, you know, it would be better for the child to be placed with them. And so the judge really needs a different lens other than DCF, for someone to go in and impartially investigate this, to say, here's my opinion on where the child can best be placed. You know, and so it could be that the guardian ad litem says it's best with mom. Or it could be that, you know, we have one case where, you know, right now we're in court and we think the best placement is for the child to be in therapeutic foster care. So it depends on the circumstances surrounding it, but that's what the GAL's job is to go in and investigate, talk to the teachers, talk to the doctors, talk to, you know, anyone, the family, everyone associated with this child, and including the child, and to make a determination on what they think is the best interest. Children have attorneys. Every child in these situations have an attorney, but the attorney has to say, this is what the child wants. So if the child wants to live, a 16-year-old wants to live with her boyfriend, that's what the attorney has to say. In a guardian ad litem has to say, well, you know, I think it's the best interest if the child still remains with mom.
I see. So the guardian ad litem is not necessarily a partner or a colleague of the attorney. It sounds like it's the attorney for the child, or a different kind of advocate for the child.
It's a different kind of advocate for the child, absolutely. And, you know, sometimes we agree with DCF even, you know, Department of Children and Families, and sometimes we don't. It's really, you know, because I think we generally spend more time in the situation, given our caseload, which is 1 or 2, compared to an attorney who has a higher caseload, or a DCF caseworker that has a higher caseload.
So who can be a GAL, a guardian ad litem? Do you have to have a legal background? Tell us about how you recruit these folks, and then about the training.
Sure. So we recruit. So we, you know, people volunteer. We go through volunteer match. We, you know, community outreach, those type of things, and people apply. They then are interviewed by one of our managers, which is a pretty extensive interview. It's about an hour long, asking about background and type of situations, and then they have their background check through DCF. And so they come from all walks of life. We got a lot of social workers, a lot of teachers, counselors. One person we just trained was just, you know, worked as an engineer in an aeronautical organization. But they come from all walks of life, and they have some kind of connection to want to help children.
What's the motivation? Is it that they themselves might have been in foster care, or they're just good, decent people?
Both. You know, for the most part, they're good, decent people that just really want to help. And a lot of times people have some kind of relation to, you know, they either know somebody that's been in foster care, or they know somebody that's been abused and neglected, or they have children of their own, or they don't, and they want to provide something for children. So it's an interesting, you know, every time I do an interview, I'm really amazed at some of the answers, because they're so different. But it gives us a good understanding of the person that we're working with. And so as we do the interview, we do the background check, and then we work with them through training. So by the end of that training, we're going to know if they're going to be a good fit or not. And go ahead.
How extensive is the training, and how is your virtual training, I guess, which you've had to shift to? How is that different? What's gained or what's lost as opposed to the in-person training?
Well, so we all meet the person live, you know, in person. everyone that we've talked to, and we meet them in person to do the interview.
Even
The
in
virtual
that
training was
now?
interesting to start. It's the same content,
Mhm.
but I think what's lost is you don't get that human interaction. Even though, something like Zoom or other kind of formats, you do see each other and
Mhm.
have that kind of interaction.
Mhm.
But I think I like the in-person because you really get a feel. You can see more of their facial expressions and their body language to get a
Mhm.
real sense of how people are feeling.
Mhm.
So I think that might be something that's lost through this, but I'm hoping that once all of this stuff goes away, that we can start to bring people back. Now, after the training is done, they go back to work with their manager, and they work with their manager on their first case together. So the
Mm.
manager has a good sense of how they're going to react
Mm.
based on some comments or based on some of their writing. And we've had the situation where they've gone through the training, they've gone through the screening, and then they work on their first case, and we're like, you know what, maybe this isn't a good fit.
Mm.
So we have that discretion too, because our best interest are these kids, and we absolutely want what's best for them.
Right.
So if we feel like someone may be too biased on their opinions, or and we try to match them as best we can, but if we feel like they're just swaying one way or other, or getting too close to a family member. And I've had that. I've said, I feel like you're getting too close to this side of the family. Do I need to take you off the case?
Oh.
So, so we have that. That's what the regional managers do. They're in charge of managing those relationships and cases.
Mm. I'm talking to Janet Frymouth, the executive director, the director of Children in Placement, which provides a GALs, which is not gal, although I guess you refer to it as gal. It's not gals
Sometimes.
and gals and guys. It's guardian in litem. These are trained advocates for children who are in the foster care system to be their advocate, in addition to the attorney when issues go before the court. So how oh, and we are on WNHH 103.5 FM in the Great Radiothon. Give a contribution, and the minimum is $5, I think. And just suggested in general is 25, but 2,500 will do. I'm sure Janet would agree. And you do that by going to childreninplacement.org, or you could go to thegreatgive.org and look up Children in Placement. There are all these, how many gals do we have? How many guardian?
Over 150.
And you were about to describe the something about the training. How extensive is the training after your interview?
The training is 40 hours, and it's combined. It's a combination of in class and homework to do over the week. So it's either 5 or 6 weeks, depending on how the class goes. But it covers things like the court system, DCF, what the roles and responsibilities are, information gathering, court report writing. So it goes over in detail all of the steps that are necessary to formulate a good report for the court.
So the GAL has to produce a report.
Correct.
In each instance.
Right.
That's a serious commitment. And is there some sort of examination to see if the material has been absorbed or at the end of the training?
At the end, we go over, the information. And as I said, we go through each phase of these to make sure there's an understanding. We have a general, exam, but it's not, but we review the exam. So if you've got the answer wrong, we discuss it.
Right.
And so for the most part, most people get through it. And I've had, we just had a training in Bridgeport maybe 2 months ago. And we started with 6 and we ended up with 4 because 2 of the women halfway through said, you know what, I don't really think I can handle this, just because of the intensity of it.
The intensity of it, right. And the GALs work with younger kids, and what you were saying, the youth sponsors work with older kids. Is that?
Well, the youth sponsor age runs 13 to 24.
Right.
The GAL range is typically 4 or 5. We do have some younger ones, but usually the attorney can then speak to the best interest because the child can't really give an opinion.
Right.
But generally it's 4 to 5 to like 18 when the child ages out of foster care. right now we have some kids that are a little bit older for different reasons,
Mhm.
but for the most part, I would say our average child age is between 6 and 12 in the
Hmm.
guardian ad litem program, even though we do have teenagers. But the youth sponsor is a totally different project that's just based on mentors. There's no involvement with the court. It's really, a
Wow.
relational kind of experience.
And how many of those do you have ongoing at the moment?
So we just started last year. We now are up to about 10 sponsors, and we have many more kids waiting. We have about 35 kids right now.
Waiting for a sponsor.
Right.
And is that like kind of is that more than a big brother or big sister for the kids?
To me, it's more of a commitment in terms of the longevity of the relationship.
Right.
So, I liken it to I met a girl when she was 17 and she's now 35, and I still have that kind of relationship with her.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it's, she has a mom, but she calls me, and it just evolved like many relationships do. She's a year older than my oldest son. And she calls me, my daughter's sick. What do I do? How do I buy a new car? Those kind of questions.
Huh.
So, yeah. So I know it can work.
What about for the younger kids, the GALs? Do they shift from kid to kid, or do they tend to, if they connect with a child, are they the advocate for the kid? I guess as long as the situation requires, correct?
Right. As long as the situation requires. Sometimes, especially during this COVID, I had one GAL that requested to come off of a case because she just is so overwhelmed with her own stuff right now.
Right.
And so we've had to reassign that case, and that's fine. That happens.
Right.
But for the most part, they're on the case until the case closes.
I'm talking to Janet Framath of childrenandplacement.org, an advocacy organization for kids, little kids, and in a recent program, older kids in the foster care system. And you could contribute to the organization at childreninplacement.org, or go to thegreatgive.org. Here we're in the second day of our radiothon. So Janet, we have a few minutes left. Tell me a little bit about how you got connected with the organization, and from the world of social work, from the world of being an attorney.
No, actually, I've worked in the state of Connecticut most of my career, and I went to Boston for a few years to run a federal contract, and I really wanted to get back to child welfare. And a friend of mine says, Janet, Connecticut, and really, I do. I've worked all over the place. He said, come back to Connecticut. And I found this position I started in November of 2017.
Oh,
and that's when I really said, I talked with, DCF, and I talked with the courts, and I said, what's missing? And it was really the supports for the children that are aging out of foster care, which oftentimes, unfortunately, get involved with the juvenile delinquency system.
Right.
And so we're working with both populations. My mentee actually came from Manson Youth, where he was incarcerated, but he was also in the foster care system.
Oh, I see. And it's the organization is, but it's the organization is statewide. How much of the mentoring and the guardian work is in the immediate New Haven area?
I would say so. That's our main office. We have a small group of sponsors in New Haven, and we have probably, I would say, a fifth of our guardian ad litem cases are there.
Okay.
The majority of our cases are in Bridgeport. I've got to say that we have two managers that work out of Bridgeport, actually.
Right.
And kids come from all over the place, so it depends on where they live. Joan Jenkins was the previous executive director before she passed for many years, and a lot of people in New Haven know her. And so, we continue to keep our base there and continue to reach out. And so, not only are we looking for donations, but we're looking for people to volunteer.
You're looking for people to volunteer as in the youth sponsor program as well as GAL?
Correct.
And how do they do that? By going to childreninplacement.org as well?
Sure.
They go there and they can volunteer.
Right.
Do you I'm remiss if I don't ask you since I'm sure you practice your poem. If you could you present that in the few minutes we have left and tell us why you
Sure.
chose it?
I actually heard it yesterday and I
Uh-huh.
thought it was so good. And you can find it on YouTube. So I had to go to YouTube and write it down. Um, but it's called The Great Realization. Have you heard this by Tom Foolery?
The author's name is Tomfoolery.
That's his pseudonym. It's really Thomas Roberts,
Okay.
but you can find it online. And
Uh-huh.
so it's a story. It says, and there's a little boy that starts it and says, "Tell me the one about the virus again, and then I'll go to bed." And he says, "But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head. And please, that's one of my favorites. I promise just one more. Okay, snuggle down, my boy, though I know you full well. The story starts before then in a world where I once dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across all lands, and they swelled and got much bigger than we could have ever planned. We always had our wants, but now it's got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a day with a click. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes grew square, and every toddler had a phone. They filtered out the imperfections, but amidst the noise they felt alone. And every day the skies grew thicker till they couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below we filled our cars. We'd drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic because our waste was never kept. Until each day when we went fishing, you'd pull them out already wrapped. And while we drank and smoked and gambles, our leaders taught us why. It's not it's best not to upset the lobbies, more convenient to die. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted and told us all to hide away. But while we were hidden amidst the fear and all the while, the people dusted off their instincts. They remembered how to smile. They started clapping to say thank you and calling up their mums. And while the car keys gathered dust, they would look forward to their runs. And with the skyless full of voyagers, the earth began to breathe. The beaches bore new wildlife that scuttled off into the seas. Some people started dancing, some were singing, some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but some good news was in the making. And when we found the cure and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found to the one we left behind. Old habits became extinct, and they made way for the new, and every simple act of kindness was now given its due. But why did it take a virus to bring people back together again? But sometimes you have to get sick, my boy, before you start to feeling better. Now lie down and dream of tomorrow and of all things that we can do. As you know, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization, and yes, since there have been many, but that's the story of how it started and why hindsight's 2020.
Mm.
I thought that was pretty good.
Well, there's a lot of silver lining there. That's what we need.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's true. In fact, we noticed just going out on a walk that the sky was just bluer and the air seemed clearer because for 30 days and more, there are very few cars on the road, is what we surmise.
Right. And you
Yeah.
think about the world that we're giving our children, you know?
Yeah.
And if we can make that kind of change, that would be phenomenal.
I would imagine that the issues that are brought up in that rhyming poem do come up in conversations between you and you and the staff, and between the guardians and the sponsors and the kids.
Yep. Yep. And like I
Good.
said, you can find it on YouTube. I think it's really kind of an amazing thought.
Yeah, yeah. Do you give any guidance to the staff or the gals in talking about COVID, or is everybody on their own to try to make sense of what's happened and how best one?
Yeah, I think, so what we have done, because we're all at home and, typically we go out to see these kids. And so I've been sending information as I get it from the courts and from DCF, but also to really get out and make sure you've got eyes on your kids. We posted some things on the website about, people in general. If you see something, say something, because there's a lot of there's a lot of tension going on for these families. Now they're trying to, either work from home or not, which is another tension. And if they've got kids, they've got school to do, and it's just a lot more pressure on families that are struggling.
Right. In addition to everything else.
Right. And so for at least our cases, I want to have eyes on these kids.
Yes. Yes. Well, Janet Frama, thank you so much with Children in Placement, childreninplacement.org. You can make a contribution to this vital organization through the that website, or go to thegreatgive.org. And you heard about it here on WNHH 103.5 FM, the Great Radiothon and the Great Give with Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. Thank you so much for being with us. Good luck, and thanks for doing this important work.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Talk to you soon.